Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality. It may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
Hello and welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast, where we try to basically attack shame anywhere we can find it. And there's lots of places we can find it. And today's topic is one of them, is kind of like dating in midlife. And so we're going to delve into that here in a minute. I wanted to make a few quick announcements. We have a few groups starting in January for those of you who may want to attend. One on navigating ethical non-monogamy. I'll be running that group. There will also be another group called Healing from Male Sexual Shame. This is typically for people who have been through some type of sex addiction model or treatment and are trying now to approach their sexuality from a sexual health perspective. We also have a ketamine group for reclaiming female sexuality. This is a one-day event on January 25th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if you've been through my Reclaiming Female Sexuality regular group, or if this is something you just want to kind of address in a different type of format, I have spots for 15 people on that. And then part of why we're having Sara on today is that she's going to be running a group at the end of January, during January 28th, also dealing with dating and kind of the hurdles and kind of tips and strategies for those who are facing the dating world again due to divorce or being widowed, all the different reasons why you might be facing a dating experience in your kind of midlife years. So,
or not midlife, or anyone that struggles with it. Just
there you go.
Yeah.
Right. So dating in general. Today we'll be talking more about midlife.
Yes.
So anyway, okay. Well, with no further ado, I would like to introduce Sara Rands, who happens to be one of my providers at Symmetry Counseling. She's super awesome and has, space for her clients to have a few more clients on her caseload. So if you enjoy Sara's energy and what she has to share, she definitely has openings. And then her partner, who is Ian Robertson, and we're going to allow for the two of you to just kind of introduce yourselves a little bit. So tell us a little bit more about you, and why don't we start there?
Sure. I'm Sara Rands. I'm a provider here at Symmetry. I graduated from Northwestern University this March. I'm a clinical mental health counselor here. I am starting this dating group because I saw a need, and we'll talk a little bit about this here. And I went through this process myself, and we'll talk about that journey here too. Also curious about this journey in others, and compare notes with friends and people in general. Look at read a lot of books about this, and look at thousands of people experience on Reddit about this, and I want to take some of this and share and make this path a little easier for others.
Perfect. Thank you, Sara. Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, I'm Ian Robertson. I'm a software engineer. Met Sara just a little over 5 years ago after being in a previous relationship for over 20 years. And we just hit it off right away. And it's been a great journey ever since.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Sara, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of your relational history as well? It sounds like Ian was in a long-term marriage. Is that correct, Ian?
Yes.
And then did you go through a divorce? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then Sara, what about you?
Yeah, me too. I was married nearly 23 years and had a faith transition, got divorced, and and dated for about a year and a half before meeting Ian.
Okay. All right. So that's not an uncommon story. Lots of people, I think, can relate to.
Yes.
The first half of life with one person, maybe started a family of some sort, and then, facing new relationship structures in midlife. So that's what we're going to delve into. So the two of you recently presented at Salt Lake City Oasis, which is kind of a secular group that meets on Sundays for those who are looking for community, but not necessarily interested in religious dogma, things of that nature. And so they offer kind of a presentation each Sunday on different topics, and the two of you presented on this topic. So maybe we'll start basically there. Like, what were some of the high points of that presentation? What were you trying to share? And we'll get going from, I'll ask further questions from there.
So, Ian and I just last month celebrated our 5th anniversary of our first date on Bumble, and which got us kind of thinking about our journey there, and about how you don't hear a lot of positive online dating stories, but I found myself reflecting and being very grateful for what online dating brings to my life on a daily basis now. And we know that a majority of relationships are started now through online dating, and that long-term committed relationships bring great things to people's lives. That's why we're in the business we're in, right? But that's not what people usually talk about with online dating, right? It's people. We hear lots of bad stories about it, which makes sense because it's also a emotionally turbulent, negative experience as well, and there can be safety concerns, and so I wanted to bring a positive story and kind of talk about what kinds of principles led it to be a positive thing for us.
Okay, well, would you like to add to that, Ian?
No, I think it was an interesting journey for both of us, and I think we each had different approaches and different experiences. The divorce at the end of my first marriage, that was hard for me to process, and I fortunately had a counselor that gave me some really good advice, including to not try to jump right back into the dating pool, but take some time to get my own life back together so that I wouldn't be trying to process trauma with dates, and just to make sure that I was a fully functioning adult. Kind of my executive functioning had come back online, and I was actually extremely fortunate. Sara was the second person I matched with, and so that saved me a lot of trouble. But it was just an amazing match from the beginning. So I think I maybe don't have as much useful advice about how to navigate online dating because I did get lucky, but still the more general process of recovering from a previous relationship and then going forward with openness and honesty and not trying to game the system or be a player, but really look for a committed long-term relationship.
Yeah. Okay. So what were you going to say something, Sara, in response to that?
And bringing substance, right? And that's one of the things that we want to talk about, kind of focusing on like being the right person and building a good single life in the meantime, right? And if you focus on that, I think, and have patience, I think most of the other details kind of work out themselves in the long run.
Yeah, right. So obviously online dating can be used for casual hookups and
Sure.
sites for that. And
no shame about that, right? We all have our, yeah.
I think not shame, but like the only supplication I would make is be honest about it, right? Be honest if you're looking for something kind of, temporary and casual and maybe just a stress relief or fun versus I'm here looking for something more long-term, because I think that's where, unfortunately, a lot of the emotional baggage starts is with these kind of like unmet expectations, right? Or, I thought you said you wanted this, but then it ends up that wasn't actually the case. And that's where I think a lot of this heartache can happen for different folks. But why don't we start with the two of you sharing a little bit about, so you're, as you're going through your divorces and you're starting to think about the future, what were some of the basic maybe fears or hesitations or, anxieties that were coming up, even insecurities? I remember after my divorce, I was like, do I have to shave my like nether? Is that what's expected of me? even silly things like that were things I was thinking about. And so, yeah, maybe
Sure. It's like you looked at my notes, Natasha. Yeah, no, this was well, dealing with insecurities, I think, is a huge thing for anybody on the dating scene.
Symmetry is now offering ketamine services. To find out more, go to simcounseling.com/ketamine-services.
Especially for me. Well, Ian had his own too. I was insecure about my body size, about my status as a breast cancer survivor. There were some key missing body parts, that just. So I, had some of my medical trauma that I got to rework through all over again, and then also like my dating skills and like social skills. Right, I had kind of skipped the dating stage with my first partner. We were friends that like kissed one day, and so like I felt like I had to like learn how to date. So those three things all together, I thought, man, how am I going to face this? And that was terrifying.
yeah.
And I think most people kind of have their own set of things to figure out. What helped me, I kind of like cultivated a positive attitude about it, about my body. My body had gone through a lot of stuff, and kind of gratitude about bringing the children into the world it did and surviving the stuff that it had, kind of being aware that of the stories I was telling myself, and that maybe kind of having some detachment from those and not like fully believing them, letting if I was like had a story that maybe was I attractive or not, like maybe that's not for me to decide, maybe that's for other people to, maybe I can like let them decide that, right? And then like having a growth mindset attitude. Okay, I can learn how to date, right? This is not a fixed thing.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome. Ian, what about you? What kinds of insecurities or anxieties were you facing?
Sure. So I was maybe a little bit oblivious to some of the things that I could or maybe should have been concerned about. For example, I'm not very tall. I'm only 5'6", and it seems that a lot of people will filter based on height. I was unaware of this, so I didn't have to worry about that. In fact, I did lie about my height. I misreported myself as 5'4", but
You lied the opposite way.
I thought I was. I didn't realize I'd grown since the last time I'd measured myself. So, but that freed me up to worry less about those things, so that I could worry about the really important things, like, am I going to die alone? I mean, that was what really had me, just concerned. Is am I going to be able to find someone at this stage in life? And so, as far as ways to deal with that, I mean, part of it was not trying to not trying to jump in too soon, making sure to practice self-care, sort of anticipating that it could be a long time, and trying to live a rich life that's not dependent on finding someone, and then figuring that would also presumably make me a more interesting person to be with. And just having a certain sense of patience, to if necessary, to see where it leads, and view it as an opportunity to meet interesting people, whether or not they end up becoming life partners.
Ian, feel free to shut me down on this question if it's none of my business, but do you also come from an LDS background? Had you gone through a faith transition, or was that not really your story?
No. I did not grow up religious, and so that was one less element to deal with.
Yeah, right. So I'm thinking about what you're both saying. I think a lot of things that people would resonate with is exactly the things you've brought up, whether it's some type of body image. I've shifted and changed since maybe my first dating experiences when I was in my teens or early 20s. And most of us have changed, whether it's weight, whether it's health issues, scarring, even more serious things like amputees or, being in a wheelchair. I mean, there's lots of different ways that we have changed as we grow older. I think too, the idea that, am I socially equipped? Like when you're in a long-term partnership, you get used to each other. And then all of a sudden, when you're not in that relationship anymore, it's like, well, I know how this person has handled my personality for a long time. How are other people going to handle my personality and how I show up? And then I do think the part that is maybe more applicable to those who come from high demand religion is that there is a tendency, a pattern that those folks are going to marry young and maybe without a lot of experience. It's not uncommon to find people, for example, from our Mormon community, Sarah, that have married, as young as 19, 20, 21, 22, and maybe to only their first, second, or third kind of like, romantic interest. And it's also not uncommon to not have had sex prior to that relationship. And so many people who are facing now, like, the dating world in their 40s and 50s and 60s are maybe, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm opening myself to people who may have had many sexual experiences. I've only had sex with one person. I don't even know, how I might show up in different scenarios, or whether I'd be considered a good lover, or whether or not, so that can bring up a lot of anxiety and insecurities too. And then back to what Ian was saying about just the fear of potentially not finding a partner, long term, and what that means. So do you want to say anything about the insecurities coming from kind of LDS culture and having only one partner potentially, or not very many experiences prior, and then being in the dating scene again?
Well, I would add one other thing is that when coming after a faith transition, there's let me collect my thoughts here. There's a change in kind of the expectations, right? There's kind of a change. They're kind of a clear social script when you're dating in Mormon land, right? You get together and there's this clear path to a relationship, and you get engaged in this short amount of time, and you don't have sex before marriage, and it makes the path very clear. And after leaving religion, it becomes a lot more ambiguous. What are the expected timelines? When do you have sex? When do and that part of the journey can be anxiety inducing for people after a faith transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And even those old scripts, like, it's interesting, even myself, as I was thinking about, I get to be my own sexual agent intellectually, I get to decide. But then as I started sexually exploring, it could be like that old, oh, did I give the milk away too soon? Am I not going to be, like, valued because, I was too loose or too free? And boy, I was like, wow, are those scripts in there? Wow, do I still function from like this slut shaming kind of narrative and rhetoric that so many of us, especially in female bodies, have, like, lived that experience. So that's interesting. I don't want to just focus on only married folks. Like, I've talked to so many single folks that are kind of in like that 40-year-old virgin scenario because they're a faith transition, maybe in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. But prior to that had been celibate due to their religious beliefs. And so because they weren't partnered, didn't have sex. And so that's even, I think, maybe an added, like, insecurity or.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's one of the inspirations for this group, is meeting a lot of people in my dating journey and professionally as well. People that seem like they would be really great partners if they could have a little bit of hand-holding at the beginning of the process, right? If they had some encouragement or encouragement, maybe with confidence, or with, maybe dressing a little better, or how to approach, so for men, especially approaching women, that's for straight men can be a really intimidating part of the process, especially in this age of Me Too. This is another place where social rules have changed and we haven't all like agreed on a script. That's another thing I want to kind of have a space to kind of talk about in this course.
Yeah, thank you. Like, what are the scripts, right? The traditional dating,
right.
for example, is, first of all, it's very heteronormative. Second of all, it's more about, whoever's wearing whoever has the penis is supposed to ask, make all the, assertions and initiations. And that's not really the world we live in anymore. But that can be challenging to know what are my roles and what's expected of me. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to what were some of the hurdles then. So as you start dating now, Ian, you're saying, hey, I was pretty lucky, date number 2, and I kind of landed a great relationship. But were there hurdles, either Sarah or Ian, even in that first time, or even setting up your profile, or, all those things that are setting up a profile? That's like a pretty
you mentioned the profile thing, and I got really hung up on that. I started off, I knew a few people that had met through eHarmony, and the first person they matched with, they married. So I figured that sounds wonderful. Avoid a whole bunch of heartache and struggle and just do that. So I went to eHarmony, and I'm filling out the profile, and I figure, for the computer to be able to do its job, it's got to have all the right information. So one of the first questions is, what do you like to do for your in your free time, okay, well, I like to do woodworking and rock climbing, and then, well, what is your passion? I would have said the same thing, but obviously they want something else. And so I spent a month trying to figure out what my passion is, and ended up with some overwrought, uninteresting answer. And then finally got on the apps and discovered that everyone else answers the what is your passion with the same thing they answer, what do you like to do in your free time? I just overthought it, and didn't have a lot of luck. Later, my counselors gave me a couple really good suggestions. One was to just approach it with a sense of humor and lightness. So, don't spend too much time worrying about it. And secondly, don't be afraid to be polarizing. Don't worry. I was worried, if I say that I like to do puzzles, will someone see that and think, oh, that's stupid. I don't want to be with someone who likes to do puzzles, but maybe we could be a great match. Just no. Say things that are about you, and that makes you a more interesting person. Even if people don't actually want to do puzzle, okay, but this person likes to do something that's important. And so that whole approach of being willing to be interesting and being willing to just throw something together. My second profile for Bumble, I threw together in 30 minutes, and I met Sarah. So with extensive scientific data, I can say that's clearly the right way to go.
Well, I love it. It's like I was less neurotic, so then I did better.
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
I love it. No, that's all really good advice. Sarah, what about you? What do you think were the hurdles or the disappointments that you faced, especially since I think you said you dated for about 1.5 years before you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one to get started was pictures. This again with the body image stuff. I had spent maybe a couple decades avoiding the camera. Speaking of neuroticism, so I had to kind of get friendly with the digital camera and figure out how to take a selfie that didn't look like a selfie. But luckily, there are a lot of good advice about how to take good pictures online. And this is another place where growth mindset can be a thing. Where you can learn how to take better pictures of yourself, and that's important for these dating apps, especially for women. It seems like okay,
So pictures was a big one. Like just
I had to
not being used to taking your own selfies.
Exactly. And that's an important part of the modern dating profile is just kind of using the pictures to, for 1,000 words and having them show your hobbies and that you're social and that just kind of show who you are that way.
Right.
And so,
Did you encounter any body shaming, like what you were worried about,
no, actually, I was surprised. It was really healthy for me in that way. Um, uh, I was very honest and like showing what I looked like, and got a lot of positive or not positive feedback, but just acceptance. People were very accepting of, and I think that's typical, right? People in midlife, they know what we're like in midlife, right? And I think the men I encountered anyway tend to be accepting of uh, of women in midlife.
body types and
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my body shaming experiences have never been on apps. It's just been on social media, right? So one time I showed pictures of my toes, like of my feet, like in the sand, and somebody said those look like cloth, like whatever. I'm like, fuck you. Somebody else like made a comment about my boobs sagging or something because I was wearing like a sundress or something. And again, I had a very similar reaction, and I was like, okay, I guess people have the right to opine. That's fine. I'm putting myself out there. But I guess what I want to really drive home is if you encounter people like this, I'm like, thank you for showing me that I want
Yes.
to be with you.
Right? Yes. And that's a key attitude, I think, for apps because you do, maybe especially women, but everybody, I think, bad actors are on the apps, right? And so I think there's a key thing about noticing that and getting rid of them right away, right? Trying not to take too much energy from running into somebody that's not a good person on the apps because they're there, and that's part of it. And you need to not let them bring you down if you want to stay in this arena.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned pictures as a hurdle. Any other hurdles that you feel like, okay, these were things that were either patterns or things that I noticed that were difficult to know how to manage?
One thing that seems to be a pattern, maybe not so much with my story, but with people in general, is kind of knowing how to handle the apps. The apps kind of promote illusions that kind of lead people to stay there forever, almost. There's this illusion of there being limitless people that you can just kind of keep swiping forever, and that your next better match is just right around the corner. And of course, we know that's not true, right? We all, have limited opportunities. But there's benefits of the apps, right? That enables people to play a numbers game. It enables them to meet people they wouldn't come across organically in regular life, and that's the benefit of it. But it can become a negative if that illusion leads you to not work through a difficult part of the good relationship in front of you, right? If you need to work through a conflict with the person in front of you, or have a difficult conversation, or commit, and commitment is scary, and you have this idea in your head that's not true, it can get in the way of reaching your goals.
I really appreciate that because I've heard that as well, that it can be difficult to land if there's 10 more opportunities potentially coming your way. And in some ways, it's true. The app will always be there. There will always be opportunities to meet new people, but there's also an opportunity cost in not settling and being comfortable with the one right in front of you, right? So that's just a perpetual what ifs, in the future. Mm-hmm. And that can be a place where people can get paralyzed or stuck for sure. So, yeah. Okay. Any other hurdles that either one of you can think of that either you've heard friends or that you went through yourself? I've heard of the ghosting, that ghosting hurdle that people start getting attached and start having a few interactions.
Yes.
All of a
Yeah,
sudden.
for me, that was a real emotional roller coaster, right? It was, well, learning how to emotionally cope with, people would be there and then they wouldn't, right? You match with somebody, you have this wonderful, deep, intuitive conversation, and it would just seem like this amazing partner. You'd build up this image of them in your head of being this amazing thing, and then they would just disappear. Right. And so I kind of learned slowly over time to calibrate my expectations with what was actually going on in reality. No, this is a person, I'm a digital person I haven't met. If I haven't met them, it's not real. Right. I encouraged myself to meet quickly so I wouldn't be falling in love with some image. And, and I lost my train of thought going.
Oh, that's fine. I think that's a great hurdle to talk about. I think another one that oftentimes I hear complaints about is pushing for sexual content, either pictures of, yourself sexually or being sent pictures, that you didn't ask for, and for people that they feel like, okay, you're saying that you want a long-term relationship, but I'm getting the feeling that you're really just wanting a sexual relationship, which kind of goes back to our honesty piece that we talked about before. But is that something that you've encountered or?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. No, unfortunately, yes. And I think it's fair to call that unless you're looking for that and that you've advertised that you're looking for that. I think it's fair to call that, put people doing that in the bad actor category, and to block and delete, and to try not to waste your energy on that.
Yeah.
It's data.
Yeah. Yeah. No, people are showing you who they are throughout this process. And part of dating is evaluating character.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think that's so important. I think maybe another thing I've heard about with online dating is the kind of the safety precautions, right? So like you said, you tried to meet people in person. And so how are you both thinking about that in regards to, okay, what are the risks? I think oftentimes the female, if there's a female partner, because obviously there's gay men sex on online sites, but I think a lot of times there's a vulnerability, right? If in regards to your own safety. So how did you think through those kinds of concerns?
100%. And this is a lot of times what the conversation is about online dating. Meeting in public places until you trust this person's character. Basically that, is especially in a straight relationship where this person that's probably stronger than you isn't going to harm you, so that takes some time. Meeting in public places. I was okay Googling people, some people do background checks, but I was okay doing quick Googles on people to see, and found bad actors that way. People on the sex offender registry for harming their children that were the same age as my children, right? Or that had done prison time, so that there's reasons to do this. And I, back in Mormon land, there were people would have a social reputation, right? And you could ask people, who knew people in the stake to find out, people's social reputation. And that's kind of how I saw Googling. And it's important to be fair also, but it's important to value your own safety as well. And for both men and women need to be careful of scams. And I've heard this has gotten worse since we dated 5 years ago. Being aware of scams and bots, this is another place where meeting quickly can be protective of your emotions. If you meet people in person and not give money to people that you haven't met, and maybe not until your relationship is well established.
Right. Yeah. That's a very common, unfortunate thing, that you get emotionally involved and you think you have an emotional relationship, and all of a sudden there's this heart-wrenching story about needing monies, and then you're feeling like, oh, well, we're in a relationship, so maybe I'll help. That's really something to be very, very careful about.
Right. No, my mantra was nothing is real until we've met.
Right. And I would say in general, I would encourage people to be very careful about mixing financial aspects of your relationship with anybody you're dating until you're really considering a long-term partnership or marriage, that where you're going to share accountability and responsibility and not just have one person start taking care of another person, especially as middle-aged adults and older. So
right, especially if we have responsibilities to our own children. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Okay. Anything else coming up in regards to the hurdles before we move on to other things? I think we covered a lot of them.
One other thing I would say would be rejection, right? That both giving and receiving rejection for both men and women is essential but uncomfortable, difficult part of the process, and that you kind of have to face it head on.
Well, which is
to get to your goal.
Well, I think a lot of people will ghost because it's difficult. That we just had a meeting today on receiving in our provider meeting. We just had a training on receiving and giving difficult feedback, right? And so this is, I think, where we get to really think about our values if we're going to sit into our adulthood, our maturity, or if we're going to play high school games, and middle school games, or can we look somebody in the eye and say, hey, these are the reasons why this isn't working for me. And and sandwich it in positivity. Like, these are strengths I see in you too, but it's just not going to work for me. I'm not developing the kinds of feelings I thought I would hope to develop and be able to have that kind of closure. I think the number one thing that I sit with in people in therapy sessions about when dating is the not knowing. Like, I don't know why it ended. I don't know. So then you're left to imagine. And we're always our worst enemies. So then we can come up with 500,000 reasons why you may not have wanted to be with me, when maybe there was just a very clear-cut reason. And it's helpful to give that feedback and to be able to receive that feedback. Yeah. Which goes to topics of resilience and emotional intelligence, which I think most of us struggle with. Most of us struggle with that. Yeah.
Well, the dating space is just a naturally turbulent place, right? Where it's a difficult place to be resilient.
Right. I mean, until it works out with one person or a few people, if you're non-monogamous, the 500,000 people you're dating, something's going to go awry.
Right.
That's why you're still dating.
Exactly.
So there is a lot of, risk taking and emotional resilience needed in this space. Yeah, for sure. Well, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but I would like for you to talk a little bit more about it. What is inspiring you to start this group? And I guess part of that goes along with the question of what do you wish you would have known earlier on. So yeah, maybe those are two different questions, but they kind of go hand in hand.
So like I was saying, we reflecting on our 5th anniversary and how this online dating in some ways enabled this relationship that enriches my life on a day-to-day basis. And so wanted to kind of share positive stories but I know that this is an emotionally turbulent place. And so kind of give people some tools where maybe it can be a less emotionally turbulent. Knowing that some people have personalities where they like more guidance and structure, right? Some people are cool just diving in, like, Ms. Frizzle, take chances, make mistakes, and others of us kind of don't like that and want some guidance. So I'm hoping that maybe some of my journey can help people have that guidance. Meeting some types of people that would be amazing partners with just a little bit of investment of some discomfort, some exposure therapy to like ideas like rejection, and if they invested some months in that, they could have a real payoff of that investment over a lifetime. and people like us in midlife that came out of a marriage and the world changed in the meantime, and uh, having to figure that out, or after a faith transition, having when they were partnered or dating before, having had the support of a religious community where there was a community, both social connections from that community and also behavioral expectations in that community that helped in the dating process. And so, and that's gone now with the faith transition. And so having a space to kind of process that and collaborate with other people that are in that space. It just seems like both having guidance about how to navigate the space and other people to process the experience with could be really helpful.
I agree. I've heard a lot of people ask about potential resources for dating. So I think you are tapping into a real need that is there in the community. And I think another thing that I would add, if you've gone through a faith transition, is now that your values have somewhat changed.
Yes.
Your idea about what is moral or what is ethical in regards to, for something as simple as premarital sex, or sharing erotic type of energy with people, flirtations, etc. So that can leave people being like, okay, so my ideas have changed, but what does that mean when the rubber hits the road, right? As far as what does that look like, and how do I navigate things like STIs and safe sex?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
these kinds of things can have real health impacts, and simple things can prevent big issues. And where do we learn these skills, right? Of starting new relationships, right? It seems like it's mostly rom-coms, and that's not realistic, right?
Agreed. Totally agreed. I mean, I don't think a lot of us got a lot of relational skills to begin with. I mean, especially if you grow up in religious communities, kind of the big skill was don't have sex until you're married. That was the big advice. And then, okay, but now that we are married and now that we are having sex, what do we do now? There's not a whole lot of guidance as to negotiations and compromise, and how do you know that you're in healthy compromise versus unhealthy, selling yourself short, and I think that can show up in dating as well, with new relationship energy, and you're kind of excited, and maybe even, I mean, I hate to use the word desperate, but desperate for it to work out. And so you ignore a lot of red flags, or you ignore concerns, because you're just in the flow of the pleasure and the beauty of, like I'm saying, new relationship energy.
Yeah.
And if you're not aware of those things and have people to mentor you through that, you can kind of fall into some regrets later on.
Right. And we want to talk about that in this course as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, so give us a sense of like the happy ending for the two of you. So in other words, like you met, it sounds like you connected fairly early. How did you two navigate, like, oh no, are we moving too fast? Are we not moving fast enough? Are we, how are we, who's going to initiate what? And, all those things. Give us a little bit of a picture into how the two of you actually navigated being where you are today and having the relationship work out.
Our first date, the plan was to meet for coffee, and then we ended up taking an hour and a half long walk, and then we went to a stained glass museum exhibit, and then we went to dinner. It was a 5-hour first date, like 3 dates all in one. And then we met 2 days later, the day after that, and almost immediately we're just trying to spend all the time we could with each other.
This is not a blueprint for what everybody should do.
No,
this is our path.
This was just we hit it off at a deep level. We benefited from the fact that both of us had kids that were still in pre-college school, and so neither of us could move, and that meant, and we were maybe 40 miles apart, so. That forced us to take it at a more reasonable pace than we might have otherwise had we been left to our own devices. And so that gave us time to, sort through the stuff that starts coming up as the new relationship energy, kind of runs into the fact that, we're both people in our late 40s that are, have expectations about how relationships work from previous relationships that aren't in total alignment, and just kind of figuring out all of those details. So being forced to not go too quickly was a good
Very
thing.
good for us.
Yeah.
Good.
Also that we had therapists, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Right. And Ian, you kind of alluded to that your counselor was pretty, I guess, instrumental in giving you some kind of like the guidance that Sarah was talking about earlier, like having some ideas of how to pace, or that even the suggestion to spend some time single and not just jump right into another relationship, which I often talk to my clients about that kind of stuff too. I'm like, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not going to be judgy. And if you're going to go have sex or do something to help you cope through some really painful stuff, okay, that's one thing. But to immediately fill a hole with a new person, like long-term relationship wise, typically has some struggles associated with it. So yeah, I think having therapists and counselors was probably very helpful.
No, she gave me that. She gave me that advice. Also advised that I try to date several people sort of in parallel, which that completely fell apart after meeting Sarah because I really didn't want to spend time with anyone else. But and then gave me kind of advice about how to navigate the tumultuous set of emotions that come with that new relationship energy, and sort of understanding that if suddenly something doesn't feel quite right, that doesn't necessarily mean that your body's trying to tell you something really important. Sometimes it's just you didn't eat something good for lunch or whatever, and it's so absolutely. We both had counselors, and it made a tremendous difference. But yeah.
What do you want to say, Sarah, as far as the connection, how the two of you got started and what ended up being, like taking you to the next step?
Oh, I think my sister gave some advice early on, just that when it works, like you don't need to try too hard, and I feel like that that feels like it applied at some level, right? Not that everything was perfect, and there were still things to work through, but there was something really intuitive about the connection from early on, that I think, and felt very fortunate that it clicked so well compared to other people. It made it easy to trust this thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's just kind of getting my mind thinking that a lot of times we talk about relationships like they take work and they take effort and they take sacrifice.
And that's true too, right? Yeah.
However, I think sometimes people put up with bad things longer than necessary because of that script. Like, well, they said it takes work, so I guess I need to, put up with certain behaviors. And I would say, especially in the dating space, and we want to explain too that limerence and new relationship energy usually lasts somewhere between 6 to 18 months. So within that first year and a half, if things are getting hard, that might be really an important thing to pay attention to, right? Because if it's too hard early on, it's not usually going to get better. Right? And those things are going to get exacerbated as new relationship energy wears off. And so to allow yourself to have permission to think, not that it needs to be completely rainbows and butterflies, but that it should be easier than harder at first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good clue as to whether or not this is something you want to continue.
Right.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I think that was another thing that we did do was it was so intense, emotionally intense, is that I try to pay attention to the actual timeline going on. Okay, we've been together this many days, this many weeks, and tried to keep my logical brain online when we were apart, so I could like try to stay in actual reality, even and let my flights of fancy do what they were going to do when we were together. To try to like stay grounded, and it did work out. I'm really grateful.
I love that. Like keep your logic on board a little bit.
Yeah, well, and kind of pay close attention to like, is his actions and words aligning, right? Kind of looking for his character, while also like being really in love and dumb and in love while while we were together.
Do you want to talk about the spreadsheet?
Do I? So I had a long list of things I was looking for in a partner. So I guess I get to talk about it now.
Sorry.
Like the Mormon girl inside me is like, I've got a checklist.
Well, we all know about young women and talking about the list of characteristics for the man you're going to marry. But for me, this was kind of more protective, just because I was more of the person that tended to fall for people a little faster, and so I needed to protect myself. I kind of needed to have the logical brain on board, and so I kind of kept a list. And well, that plus there were so many ways that people I met were disappointing. So I had to, so the list had, basic things like has a job, doesn't have anger issues, things like that I could just kind of, okay, if it's on this list and it's come up, I don't have to bother thinking about it. I can just move along. I don't have to second guess myself. Yeah. And kind of focusing on the things that actually did matter in relationships. I remember reading a book about what the research was about things that do matter in what makes people happy in a relationship. Like people think that it matters that you have like common hobbies and things like that, and that matters less than you think. But things like, are you actually kind and respectful to each other? That matters a lot more, right? And so paying attention to those kinds of details. Yeah. But yeah, I had this on a spreadsheet, and Ian passed it all, and we shared it on when we were together, like 2 weeks, and he thought it was sexy, and that was a great
I thought it was really cool. I mean, I come from a STEM background, and so, having this logical framework just seemed like that's amazing. That's great.
I love this so much. It's like meant to be.
Yes.
Yes.
And your date likes it. That's a sign right there. And not only do they like it, they find it sexy. So that's even better. No, I'm like you, Sarah. I tend to be fairly analytical. I'm partnered now with my old high school boyfriend, so we had known each other before. And so I was giving him the whole limerence thing, and he's looking at me like, well, didn't we do that back in the day? And I'm like, no, now we're doing it again. So I was like constantly doing timelines. And then I was like, well, yeah, we've been together for 18 months, but we haven't really been together because we were separated by distance, also. And so I'm like, I don't think of it as totally counted. So it was like 3 years before I gave up the limerence thing. And he's just like, okay, lady. He put up with it. I'm not sure he thought it was sexy like you thought her spreadsheet was sexy, but he tolerated it. All right. Anything then, because we're kind of towards the end, is there anything I'm not asking that you wish I was asking? Like, is there something that you're like, oh, we really wanted to talk about this, but she forgot to ask us about it or didn't think to?
So maybe one thing is, I think when people face the dating world after, maybe in general, especially after a faith transition or a divorce or a big life changes, they need to like ask themselves who they are again. There's a lot of identity work they need to do, especially before looking for a partner. So there's looking at who they are now after this thing, and then they can look at who they're looking for. And we'll look at some of that during this class as well.
I really like that. So doing a lot of your own personal identity work, if you're wanting to attract a certain type of person, you need to know who you are.
Right. Or even know what you want.
Right. Know what you want, which you think that would be an easy thing for us to answer.
Mm-hmm.
No, not really. Not super easy. Yeah, especially when you've been told all your life what you should want. And I think not only does religion do that, but culture does that. Media does that. Family expectations do that. So a lot of times it's like, do I want these things, or am I being told that I want these things? So that's a really good reminder. All right. Well, why don't you just give us a little bit more information about your upcoming group? You had mentioned a few details earlier, but why don't you talk a little bit about what's the format? Is it in person? Is it online? Who can come? Who should come? When's the dates, the times, etc.?
Sure. This will be a group for people of all genders and orientations and ages. I could see later on, if we have enough people, dividing it out especially I could see based that the straight men experiences might be different than the straight women experience. But for now, for everybody, we'll be encouraging mutual empathy for everybody and sharing experiences. This isn't a meetup group for introducing people to each other. We want everyone to feel safe, and that's the most importance in this group. It'll be 6 weeks, online group on Zoom, and starting, I believe it's on Tuesday evenings at the end of January, I believe January 28th.
And is it for like an hour and a half, or like?
Yeah, an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Okay, 6 weeks, Tuesday nights. Do you have a time frame? Do you have a time set already?
7 p.m. Mountain.
7 p.m. Mountain. So that lets you, if you're on the East Coast, you can still attend. And if you're in, Pacific Coast, you can attend. Yeah, it's a good time. And then, and it doesn't matter where you are geographically. So that's
right. And we have the website up about that. It's at simcounseling.com/dating-skills.
Okay.
Or at the page
and include that link to the show notes on the podcast, and also here on this Facebook thread. I'll include a link to that. You can sign up. You can call the office. You can email the office to register. What is the cost per session?
It's $20 per session.
$20 per session. So that's very affordable. If you can't afford that, we have some financial aid available at Symmetry Counseling for people who can't afford that. So call and see, what you could afford, and we usually will take you up on that amount if we have enough funds in our kind of scholarship area. Yeah, I'm super excited that you're doing this. I think it's necessary. I hope people take you up on it. I think it is a good place to meet other people, even though it's not for a meetup. It's, meet other people who are in similar experience. Groups kind of just are magic. They're kind of magic in the healing department in ways that I haven't, I didn't do groups for most of my career. I just started doing groups in the last 3 to 4 years. And why didn't I do this earlier? This is so healing. There's something in a group setting that you can't really offer in an individual setting. So it's really kind of special that way. So, all right. So if you're interested, go to simcounseling.com. Also, if you've enjoyed getting to know Sara, she's one of our providers. So she also offers individual counseling, couples counseling at Symmetry as well. Ian, it was lovely to have you with us. Join us. Thank you for joining your wife in this endeavor of sharing a little bit of personal.
It's been a pleasure.
I think it's special when people are willing to share a little bit of personal stuff, that makes you relatable and that helps others understand, hey, even though we're the therapist or we're the counselor, we also have struggled and gone through our own experiences, and we come in with those, things to hopefully benefit our clients as well. So thank you for your time with me tonight.
And thanks, Natasha.
Thank you.
Next time. Thanks. Take care. Goodbye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes are by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the novel, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. Of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Nahotishki shade the novel, so we can to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki shade the novel, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland